Hi, this is Blair Pleasant, and I'm here with my BCStrategies experts. And we have two special guests for today's BCStrategies podcast. We have Joe Eisner and Jay Yeras, who started a new company called blissAI. Joe is the CEO and Jay is the CTO. And I've known Joe for many years, and Joe and Jay have tons of experience and quite the background in contact center and CX. They were both co-founders of Amazon Connect. They worked at Genesis, and they have very impressive pedigrees. And I recently had a briefing with them about blissAI, and I thought it would be interesting to talk more about what blissAI does, how it's being used in the market, how it can help organizations, and so on. So I'll let Joe and Jay give an overview of the company, and then I've got a couple questions, and then we'll open it up to the BCStrategies experts to ask some questions. So Joe, why don't we start with a general overview of what challenges you saw in the CX market and why you founded blissAI?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Delighted to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing and how we can delight enterprises and people in the CX space. So there's a number of trends going on right now that merited our service. For instance, 90% of respondents to a Gen AI study said that they needed to, data management was an imperative, and they plan to make significant investments in data infrastructure to prepare for AI. So there's an awareness among some of the leading, CXOs and enterprises that there's a data imperative. They need to prepare in the the CXOs in the banking space. Majority of them said that consolidating and using customer data was a major barrier to digital transformation. Somebody's typing, and
Sorry.
yeah, no problem. So, like I said, a majority of CXOs in the banking space said that consolidating and using customer data was a major barrier to digital transformation. 8 out of 10 banking respondents can't use AI to analyze contact center data today. And a majority of organizations are suffering from an inability to leverage legacy systems, including some of the systems that we're talking about in our service, to extract data and make sense of it. And so with Gen AI coming, there's tremendous need for data. The question is, where do you get this data from? And can you, tap into something that you already have? And as Blair, as you pointed out in our last call, the issue is that a lot of companies, enterprises like financial institutions, healthcare companies, retail, they have significant amounts of stored call recordings, which could fuel their agentic AI, their conversational AI bots, their CX insight strategies, but they don't realize they have it. They're sitting on a gold mine, and a lot of them don't realize it. So what we wanted to do at Bliss was provide enterprises with a means by which they could extract gigantic volumes of call recordings that they're already stored with these workforce and quality management vendors, extract that at a fraction of the price and in a fraction of the time that it would take the vendors themselves to liberate these recordings, because they really have no motivation to want to see people leave their estate. So migrate these call recordings into open standards in the cloud, for instance, and then enable businesses to do n number of things with them that we can talk about. So really, the service is extract call recordings quickly at a fraction of the price of the vendors themselves, and then enable third-party tools, conversational AI, agentic AI, LLM training, etc., and use best-of-breed tools as the customer wishes for these liberated recordings. And Blair, you're on mute, I think.
So who's the target market? This seems kind of like a niche offering. So who is this aimed at, and why is it compelling for them?
Yeah, great question. So the target market are really any enterprises that have, either for regulatory reasons or quality control reasons, have amassed significant amounts of interaction recordings between agents and customers that they're mandated in many cases to keep for compliance reasons, and are now looking to create a Gen AI strategy or further their AI strategy, or just want to service and support their CX strategy using tools that the proprietary vendors wouldn't necessarily have in their portfolio. So the benefit really is you get these recordings extracted, you can put them in the cloud, and then you can leverage any number of services to derive value from them in a way that you can't necessarily do today, where you're trapped in a proprietary vendor's ecosystem and using only the tools they decide should be integrated or leveraged.
Okay. Can you talk about some use cases and maybe even any customer examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's probably more use cases than we have time to talk about today. I'd say the key ones are training LLMs and SLMs, so large language models or smaller language models, or what's coming, which is vertical AI. So a company, let's say in the healthcare space, with lots of data, could populate, combine the electronic healthcare interaction data with patients with their EHR data to augment that and create a more full spectrum picture of the subscriber to the healthcare service. And also for in banking, could be leveraged to hyper-personalize interactions. It's increasingly important for these banks to maintain their competitive edge. Hyper-personalization is one of the ways they can do that and resonate better with customers. And by extracting this data and mining it in appropriate ways using AI, they can see more value. Another, which is really compelling, is applying natural language processing and AI to the data to query it in natural language. So let's say you have an executive who's not a data scientist or a really smart guy like Nicolas, and you don't know how to query the data appropriately. You can just ask questions like you would normally with other forms of AI and get output that is compelling, and you don't need special training or background to do it. Jay, I don't know. I've kind of been taking the hog in the phone here. I don't know if you have
Nope, it's
anything
all
to
good
add
stuff.
to it.
All good stuff. And just to kind of quickly go back to a couple points that you brought up, Blair, in terms of niche market. The truth of the matter, though, is this is actually for several organizations. We all know that there are a multitude of companies across multiple verticals in the United States that have been in business for a number of years. And during the course of that time, they've likely switched their contact center solution from one vendor to another, potentially having up to 2 to 3. And with that, there's just a multitude of advantages for using a service like the one that we provide. At the forefront of this is really the cost savings, because with each of these institutions having to retain those call recordings for a multitude of years, sometimes up to 8 or 10 years, over the course of that time, they end up with disparate data silos within the organization. Think back, to tape drives, NAS devices. So to Joe's point, they don't realize that they're sitting on this data because it becomes long forgotten. It's just taken for granted that we're just going to continue to pay a vendor contract for support and maintenance just to be able to do the basic search, retrieval, and playback of these recordings. All the while, because they're locked in these proprietary formats, they're effectively useless for a lot of the technologies that have been coming around lately with AI/ML and being able to take actionable insights from your data. So our service is really providing them with the liberation of those call recordings by converting them from those proprietary formats to open formats, consolidating a lot of these data silos, which effectively can be in any cloud provider or even on premise. And then once we have them converted and in a centralized repository, then we can connect these to AI/ML and be able to derive insights from that data, which is effectively what these organizations are really looking to do. But as we've seen from research that has been done, a lot of organizations are struggling to find the meaning in this data, in part because the quality of the data is poor. They also don't understand how to make the inferences of that data and how to effectively leverage it to improve CX experiences. Joe, I don't know if you want to add some color to that.
No, there was a guy, Arnab Chakraborty, who's a chief AI officer at Accenture, and he said that the quality of the data, the ability to integrate multiple sources of data, and the timely democratization of data are vital to having Gen AI and being competitive in the Gen AI space. And so, just Blair, to circle back to your niche market observation, it's a niche market in the sense that a lot of companies, as you yourself pointed out to me, don't realize they have this data. But in the sense that, the data market itself is gigantic. You're talking billions of dollars. Predictive analytics for the data is a gigantic market. And now with the agentic AI initiatives at Salesforce, Microsoft, and others, there's going to be a tsunami of demand for organic data that you can leverage versus paying for expensive synthetic data that you buy on the open market. And so I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of the awareness, but I think it's a timely, and I believe it will increasingly be a prominent need and market, because there is a lot of awareness among the CXOs that they need the data. They just don't realize they already have a source of it in their workforce and quality management archives.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to open this up to the BCStrategies experts. And Chuck, I saw that you have a question, and then Martha, I know you're chomping at the bit. So why don't we start with Chuck and then Martha?
I'm happy to let Martha go first.
Well, so this is a particularly interesting day for me on this particular topic, because I've had a problem with my electric provider, and I've spent 90 minutes in 2 calls trying to get a problem resolved, and in every case we had to start over with everything. So I was very annoyed, and I understand and feel my pain. On the other hand, what this doesn't address at all, and Blair and I have talked about this, is privacy. Who's giving you consent to own this data? We just went through an example, and the vendor will not be named, but the fact is they were a third party, and nobody gave them consent to have that data, and they got sued. It was settled. I don't know what the settlement was. But the fact is they were using data that wasn't given to them and to which no one had given them permission. So who's given you permission to use this data? And secondly, how is it possibly compliant with the new EU AI guidance?
Jay, do you want to handle that, or do you want me to take it?
Let's tag team it. I mean, in terms of who's authorizing us or to have the data belongs to the customer, and that's the core to the thesis, is that it is your data. The only thing that we're providing for the customer, or the key thing that we're providing for the customer, is really that autonomy and freedom, that they should not be beholden to a legacy vendor that locks that data into a proprietary format. We're not housing the data for the customer. We can provide the reference architecture for them to store the converted recordings into a target environment, but it resides with the customer. And Joe, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, Martha, I think to augment that from an end user perspective. So let's say we're talking not just about Kaiser, but about the Kaiser subscribers and their data. Our mission is to either anonymize that data on behalf of the customer once it's liberated, or have a vendor partner who would redact and do PII and all that. But the customer, none of the permissions change. So if Kaiser were to, and I don't know who their workforce, but let's say it's NICE. If they were to leave NICE or export these call recordings from NICE into the cloud, let's say in S3 and in AWS, none of the security challenges would change. It would still be the data that Kaiser owns, and whatever relationship they have with the subscribers and how they anonymize or don't anonymize that data, that all carries over. We're not changing any of that, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that doesn't really answer what maybe I didn't say it very clearly, but the customer, I mean, just on the most basic level, when I called NYSEG this morning, they said this call may be recorded. Do you accept that? Well, that was me accepting that NYSEG had that information. It was not accepting that anybody else who was operating NYSEG's contact center could use that information. And so that's my concern. You're a third party. The end user, the person who's making the call to the contact center, isn't giving permission to a third party to have access to the data.
Well, that's a basic 101 beyond the call recording itself, right, Martha?
Well,
I mean, that's the user itself, or the company themselves allowing permission. That has nothing to do with the call recording per se. But it's a good point, Martha. It's an excellent point, actually.
And my guess, Martha, is that there's small print in your agreement with the power company that says that you allow them to share the data for operational and communication purposes. I would almost bet on it that you've signed something like that, implicitly or explicitly.
But what it's giving
in that is.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say inherent with that is you've already given consent to NICE. If we're using NICE as an example, and we don't have to pick on NICE, we can use Verint as well. They already have access to the data, especially if they're hosting and storing those call recordings on their cloud. So you granted the consent. So the question you're asking, I think, is a very valid question. I don't know that it's specifically applicable to Bliss, because if that were the case, it's applicable to every single vendor that is recording call recordings.
Mm-hmm.
So well, you know what? I don't want to monopolize the question, so I will be quiet.
Yeah, something I sense we could go on for much longer than we have here. Chuck had posed a question about blissAI being focused strictly on legacy audio media, or does it also amalgamate historical reporting? And I think we can do both. So we can. When you say historical reporting, do you mean KPIs on agent performance?
Well, it's the same challenge you have with recording. I want to go back 4 years and hear a recording, but it's on my Verint platform. I'm now on, I don't have the app, or it's a pain to get it. Same thing with historical. I want to see my call patterns. How many calls did I get on a March in 2005? I don't have access to that data anymore. So it's the same problem, just a different media. My question was, do you also allow a pathway to liberate the historical data?
Insofar as it's related to the call recording with data and metadata, like, for example, the agent that was on the call, was it inbound, outbound, where was the originating number, et cetera, things like that. The conversion process is not just converting the audio codecs from the proprietary format to the open format, but also extracting, as I said, that data for the call recording. So the target environment, where it is that's going to be stored, using a very generic example of a reference architecture on AWS, could be Oracle, would include a database, would include the object storage, all housed or hosted by the customer themselves, and then a front end that would allow the basic search, retrieval, and playback for those call recordings, which with filters and search functions would give you the historical reportings you're looking for, insofar as being able to pull back a couple of years and be able to target a specific region or call center that, depending on who you were as a customer, you might have multiple contact centers, et cetera. That type of reporting. Reporting in and of itself, obviously spans. So if we're looking at additional insights from reporting, like sentiment analysis, again, once that information has been extracted, depending on the customer's needs, if they want to go advanced and do speech to text, that information can also be derived and provide sentiment analysis and other key factors.
So I think you've answered my question. Anything that is adjacent to the audio recording, data that's adjacent to that, you can pull. But I was asking about just historical reports. Like, I took 438 calls last hour, in a report. That you're not seeing, not touching, not considering at this point.
No, if there was already reports that were extracting that
Mhm.
information in a legacy system, the reporting themselves would not be part of the process. We could derive the same type of reports from the same data and metadata that they're pulling from their legacy system, but it's purely a call conversion and data extraction.
Because I do hear from a lot of clients that say, we're concerned that, we used to be on this platform. That's all of our recordings. Now I'm on a different platform. How do I get at? I know it's there, but how do I open it up and get it? And it sounds like that's the problem you're addressing, or one of the problems. Okay.
Yeah. And to answer Nicolas's question, so Nicolas asked, do you aggregate with other data? The answer is we can, we're in a position where we could hand off to a partner vendor, let's say conversational AI or others who could do that, aggregation with other data. So for instance, like Oracle with their Oracle Health, they own Cerner. They could take the liberated data from a healthcare customer and aggregate that with EHR data and other metadata or data from other systems to create a full snapshot. Or we will be able to do that as well in phase 2 of our evolution and rollout of the service. And I just want to point out one other thing that I didn't mention at the outset, Blair, which is that this service has seen a number of large banks, healthcare companies, and other companies do massive conversions with this service. So while we have newly launched it in September, it is not a new service in and of itself. We are just bringing it to the CX and contact center space. But there have been many large customers, Rothschild Bank and ANZ Bank, Deutsche Bank, Citigroup, Bank of America, many others. So it's a well-established service. It's not unproven. We're just socializing it and bringing it to the CX and contact center space with additional capabilities.
Okay, that makes sense. Kevin, Dave, Steve, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Oh, Kevin, go ahead. You start.
Yeah. So, I mean, would it be fair to say, Joe and Jay, this is, mostly right now, it's a data conversion service. So I have a lot of pictures of my kids on the whatever VHS-C, those little cassettes. And of course, now I can't watch them because I don't have a machine. So at some point, I'll pay to get them converted to a digital format, and then I can do whatever I want with that, right? Is that a too simplistic analogy of what you're focused on?
No,
I
it's
think
spot on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And truth of the matter is we're not alone. So some of you may or may not know, but there's an open source movement that is trying to push forward a format called VCon, or virtual conversation. Think of it analogous to VCal, what took place with calendaring solutions. So that universality, because true to our thesis of this is your data, it should be liberated, the customers are paying for the hosting of these call recordings, yet they're constrained. And that's not right. So we're not alone in that sentiment that there should be a conversion that would allow for a free and open format that gives customers the freedom to be able to move their call recordings with ease from any platform that they choose to.
And that's really clear. I guess what I'm then confused about is, of course, getting the data from, as you point out, sometimes 2 or 3 different systems into a central repository. That absolutely enables me to do all kinds of great historical data analysis, and it enables me the data as the fuel to AI. But I'm going to ask about the company's name. blissAI makes it seem like you're doing the AI, but in some ways, it's like, at least in what you're describing now, it's like more bliss enabling AI. Is that?
Yeah, fair point. So it's what we call the presumptive close. Our aspiration is to bring more AI goodness to the data party as we move forward. Our initial mission, though, Kevin, as you rightly said, is to actually get some conversions going and do the phase 1. But eventually we will apply AI to it. We did have another project we were working on prior to this that was more directly out of the box with Gen AI, but we had to put that on hold while we focused on some other things.
But if I may, I think, this ties into Joe and I and our background. Like any scrappy startup, we have our aspirations, our hopes and dreams, and we do a crawl, walk, run approach. So Joe and I have a combined half a century of CX and technical experience in the CX space. Our goal is really to productize and be able to give that added value to customers, which is an actual pain point for most of them, that leveraging AI tools in order to make sense of the data, to be able to do that in the context of CX is a challenge. And that's where Joe and I can bring that expertise and also apply that to our roadmap. So while the product offering today is focused solely on the conversion, it is a very integral first step in unlocking the value of the data, and more of that story will continue to unfold where blissAI can actually automate and be able to enhance that experience for customers at scale.
Okay,
And
so just a quick final comment and unsolicited piece of advice. Like, I think the thing is once you start doing AI on the data, now you're in this, kind of world where there's 1,000 other startups that are doing the same thing. It's like what you're doing now, it is a unique service. So it's like use the AI to do the data conversion, and then I think you've got a unique offering. Anyway, but I'll turn it back to my other experts.
Steve, you had a question?
Yeah. So Joe and Jay, thanks so much for this. I think, we have a lot of large enterprise customers who are on the premise and have this exact issue, where they're on legacy call recording. We need to adapt them into the new environment, and yet they don't gel together, right? They're not compatible together. And yet, with a chart that you shared earlier, it looks like, all of the standard codecs from G.711 to 729 to others are all, you can use for baseline purposes. So I think there's definitely an issue here. And of course, every customer is going to have baselines for, how long they're going to keep their data, right? So that's always one thing. And then the other thing is, like, how are you going to compete, so to speak, with the speech and text analytics arm of a WEM, module, from a Genesis, from a NICE, from a Five Nines. So how is your solution either better or more economical, or why would someone use you over their standard, speech and text analytics module?
So I'm going to chime in real quick and add a couple 2 cents and then pass it over to Joe real quick.
Sure.
Just to take a page from our past lives, I think Joe and I are pretty well aligned that we'd rather not focus on competition and how we compare to others, rather focus on the customers and the pain points that we're solving for them. So this begins again with, first and foremost, let's get that call recording data liberated. And I'll pass it over to Joe to get some insights on what's ahead with the other parts of that question.
Yeah. So, as Blair indicated, we were both at AWS, and if there's one thing you walk away from AWS with, if you survive long enough, is customer obsession. And it is burned into my brain for the rest of my life, and it's how I approach everything now. Not because I was forced to, but because it makes so much sense. And
Sure.
And all the research that I did, and I've got now approaching.
I just want to say that when you say that about Amazon, I think that's the Jeff Bezos Amazon. I don't know if that's the current Amazon, that customer obsession. I think
that's the one we were at.
Yeah. But yeah, so we start with the customer. The research indicates that all these customers are struggling with this pain point of getting good sources of data. And again, as Blair indicated rightly, it's awareness creation that is our challenge, as opposed to identifying a need. And I think that I think as we go forward, and especially with these agentic AI pushes, imagine, right? You're Optum. I'm just making up a company, right? And you're sitting down and you want to use Salesforce agentic AI. The first question is, okay, where's the data to train the agents, right? And immediately this comes into focus, right? And we're going through channel partners. So we've met with a tremendous number of companies already, even though we're newly out of the gate. And I can't tell you how many times we've gotten the response. We were just talking about this. This was just a topic that came up. We didn't know what we could do. This is timely. Or, they're looking for ways to augment their data, AI, and analytics practices and CX practices, given the diminution of revenue from CCaaS implementations that they're experiencing. And this is a great way to augment their service revenue by helping customers create these CX data lakes and populating it with data that they own and that they can leverage.
So you mentioned a cloud earlier, and I think I read from your bio that you also have a premises solution as well. So assuming you're storing in the cloud, how do we, protect the data from other customers, to Martha's earlier point? And, how do we know that, again, each individual's customer's data is secure? And a footnote on that, how do you handle the HIPAA and PCI compliance component?
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, we are not hosting the data. We are providing customers with a reference architecture that is a suggestion for how that data should be housed, but it is housed with the customer. And as with any, cloud workloads, it's part of that shared responsibility model. It's not a trivial thing. We would provide, again, the sample reference architecture. We could either implement it. It adheres to, well-architected and security best practices, but ultimately it is the customer's responsibility as if with everything else, because it's their data, they're hosting it on their environment. So that would be a task that their DevSecOps and IT teams would tackle. Steve, I did want to make sure I was respectful and answered the other part of your question, because I think you mentioned cost as well. It's every customer is different, but we can make educated guesses based on averages. And we ran some estimates on, a hypothetical organization that might have 50,000 employees with that potentially 1,500 agents. We can go through the math on potential call volume, et cetera. But just based on averages, organizations like that have to record and store those call recordings would look on the high end to be approximately 1.5 million a year in total spend when you factor in the storage costs, the operational overhead for human capital to manage and maintain it, support and maintenance contracts, et cetera. And that's just on a 1-year basis. Our cost to do these conversions are a fraction of the price than anybody else. And it adds value to the customers by being able to liberate themselves, not just from the call recordings, but from all these bills. So it's a cost savings conversation as well. One that could see up to north of 300% ROI just in year one alone.
And that,
and
Mike and Steve, sorry,
ahead.
that doesn't include the savings that you realize by not having to purchase synthetic data, which would be yet another savings on top of what Jay referenced.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure all of us would be interested in seeing an example, ROI model. So, one other thought, and this is more of a thumbs up for you. I think, this actually helps if we've moved, let's say, from a premises model to a CCaaS cloud model, okay, and then has decided 2 years later that we want to migrate to another vendor. Again, we don't lose any of that retention, because we're using your vehicle. So to me, that's a huge, potential event. You're not, held to one vendor for the rest of your life in the cloud, so to speak.
Couldn't have said it better, Steve.
You're liberated.
You can pay me later.
Anybody can say it better than Steve, but it's another conversation. But
yeah.
So I think most of this conversation has been very tactical, talking about security, talking about hosting, talking about all this stuff. I think there's a more important element here that I think we need to hit on, which is the contact center has always just been a real-time thing, right? It's just always been this real-time thing, and the store of data, the records are in other systems like CRMs or other purchasing systems or whatever, and so when contact centers want to find out something like something about a customer, they go look at the CRM. If they want to go look at the purchase history, they go look somewhere else. But what's really happening with the generative AI capabilities is the contact centers are now producing their own data and can now go look in their own cabinets to get this information. And I think this is, a fairly significant change. And I think this is really, really important and a big part of what you're doing. And so, it used to be if you wanted to figure out why why customers are calling, you'd go to some other system like a CRM to figure out the reason codes, whatever. But now you can just listen to all your recordings and put it up against AI and figure out why people are calling. And it's actually better data instead of having an agent be forced into some sort of menu about why a customer called. You're actually getting it directly from the conversation. So this is a really important, significant change. And so I think, Kevin made a comment about converting, format to format or something like that. It's much more than that. This is actually, liberating that contact center data, and the contact center not just being ephemeral data, but actually leveraging its own data. And I think this is really important. I think Nicolas has talked about this in the past as well. So I love what you're doing. My question for you, we talked about your AI stuff, but explain the bliss part. What part of this is perfect happiness? I don't get that part.
So when we formed the company and I was thinking about a name, names are important to me. I don't know why. My daughter's name I spent a lot of time on, and I wanted to use a word that was joyful and that we would like to say. And as opposed to one of these names that sounds like the name for a new Viagra alternative or something, companies are generating these like ridiculous names. And bliss to me, it's like, what do you want if you're in a job and you just want to get things done? You want to get back to bliss. You want to get rid of the problems and you want to be happy. And so it struck me that it was a constructive and positive name in an environment that's increasingly overall negative, and again sounds like a list of pharmaceuticals to get rid of heartburn or cure other things.
Well, Dave, I just got to say to that bliss isn't a bad name for a Viagra alternative either. So, but thank you.
But Dave, would you be in bliss if we were to help you unburden yourself from those proprietary formats, save money, feed into those CX data lakes, and then have actual insights that can not just help your CX practice, but the organization as a whole? That's bliss.
I appreciate the sentiment. Good contact center word. I appreciate the sentiment. I just have a little bit of trouble with the word bliss and contact center kind of going together. But I appreciate what you're trying to do there. Thank you.
Well, I think we're going
Dave.
to end it on a high note, talking about bliss and joy and all that wonderful stuff. So I think you know why I wanted to have Joe and Jay talk to us about blissAI, because it really is something that I thought was pretty interesting and unique and can solve a lot of problems that, frankly, a lot of companies don't even realize that they have. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. And any final words, Joe and Jay, or where can we find you, or what should potential customers be thinking about?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the time.
Yeah, can't thank you all enough for taking the time to meet with us and to get a chance to expose this. Again, what we want to do is make it easier for companies to use their own data to advance their AI and CX initiatives and improve things. 60+% of people can't use AI to apply to contact center today. We think we can help accelerate that. We are very happy to meet with anybody who would like to learn more. Our blissai.co is the place to go to schedule a meeting. And we'd be delighted to talk to anybody. The service is based in the United States, but can handle loads anywhere in the world. And we're ready to roll for any customer who wants to be delighted with their new data domain.
Okay, well, thank you guys, and thank you to the BCStrategies experts, and we will see you next time.
Thank you very much.